peaceful. But in fact, these are the days of growing technical abilities, of increasing activity in every field, and so there's an urgent need for rapid and direct personal contact. We already have transport by rail, transport by steamboat, transport by road, and transport of the written word. And now there's going to be a means of transport for the spoken word. The Dutch, a trading and seafaring people who've always depended on means of communication, are among the very first to pick up the telephone. So it's in Amsterdam we find among these people the first 49 subscribers, who could communicate with each other by means of these apparatuses. In the heart of the city, on the top floor of this building, the first telephone exchange was installed. There were the switchboards, and there the operators who connected the subscribers. The people who owned the telephone in those days formed a small and exclusive club. People who were already connected by all sorts of common interests. The connections were made by means of freely suspended copper wires, called overhead lines. And in the city, the high telephone poles with their cages were an ugly but a familiar part of the skyline. Such a telephone was equipped with an alternator. By pressing the handle a few times, the operator at the exchange was summoned. The subscriber asked to be connected with a fellow subscriber, and he was able to do this because of the battery which was part of each telephone. The operator called the other subscriber and established the connection desired. This is the way the local battery system operates. But some people didn't accept wholeheartedly the intrusion of this telephone equipment into the privacy of their homes. It was camouflage. In spite of this self-deception, the number of subscribers grew rapidly, and the exchanges had to be enlarged. Already in 1896, the Amsterdam Directory contained 6,400 names. But telephoning wasn't just restricted to Amsterdam. In other Dutch cities too, the telephone began to play its part among the existing means of communication. As early as 1899, a trunk telephone network existed in the Netherlands. The most extensive local exchange areas were by now operated in the cities of Amsterdam, The Hague, and Rotterdam. And so we enter the new century. It's a period when people like to indulge in long conversations. One topic will have been the opening of the first cinema houses and the personal appearance of the first commentator.
The arrival of the Duke of Mecklenburg and Her Majesty the Queen at the station in The Hague. The highly strung horses are dancing impatiently. And there the groom jumps onto the box. And here we see the many distinguished personalities leaving for the royal palace.
One only had to turn the handle and lift the receiver to be connected to the exchange. In the local battery system, each telephone had its own battery. But the increase in the number of subscribers made this system less and less practical. The need to concentrate resulted in a system by which the power supply to the speech circuit was provided at the exchange itself. An important simplification. The magneto-generator with its handle disappeared. The central battery system. One only had to lift the receiver to be connected to the exchange.
Hallo, wat nummer wenst u?
Mag ik van uw nummer 2382?
So human voices fly backwards and forwards. The telephone lines that carry them still faithfully follow the same roads through the country that do the other means of transport. The same roads, but infinitely faster. All the same, these overhead lines had their drawbacks, because the increase of trunk telephone traffic made the necessary constructions top-heavy. They could be blown down in a storm and cause stoppages of communication. In short, the overhead line transmission became impossible in the long run. It was necessary to bundle the wires into cables that would go underground, and this job had to be done all over the country. So begins a new phase in the technique of transmission. The system of the sound transmission by telephone had now become so complicated that only a few specialists understand anything about it. Those few are justly filled with pride. And yet this is only the beginning of an impressive development. But this cabling over a certain distance had an unexpected consequence, a weakening of the signal, the attenuation. The engineers Crarup and Pupin invented systems to overcome this, for instance by introducing coils into the circuit.
What are you saying? Can you speak louder?
Yes, that's better.
The cables had to put up with rough treatment, especially in the damp soil of Holland. So the manufacturers had to meet very special requirements. The wires had to be individually insulated and then stranded into a bundle by a stranding machine. This cable is then given a series of protective layers of jute and tar, as well as metal armouring against mechanical damage. And then they're ready to go underground and there to do their duty for 1 or 2 generations. So it was the operator who established the connections of her switchboard, where all the subscribers' lines met. But this system required so much space that one operator couldn't possibly connect 2 numbers that were far apart. Obviously the system had to be changed. The multiple field was introduced. On the board, the incoming and the outgoing calls were separated. On this multiple field, the operator took care of the demands of only 200 subscribers, and she could connect these with any other number, but with the restriction of 8 calls, thus 8 connections at the same time. The continuous increase of the number of telephones made it impossible to concentrate them all in one exchange. And that is why in the large towns, sub-exchanges started being built. They were connected to each other and also to the trunk telephone exchange. In the towns and in the country, the telephone authorities continued cabling the network, so that more overhead lines disappeared. There was a limit, however, to the expansion of the multiple field switchboard with its manual operation. The maximum number of connections was about 12,000. But were there no other technical possibilities? Of course there were. One had already been realized. The flat surface could be bent into a half circle around a shaft. Arms attached to the shaft could pass over the contact points. These contact points were the subscribers' lines. The 2-motion selector, simple and ingenious. It was invented in a fit of anger by an undertaker in Kansas City, USA, Almon B. Stroger. This honorable merchant was going bankrupt because the local telephone operator he depended on for all his business calls was putting him through to his competitor with whom she was having an affair. The invention of a mechanical operator would assure him the return of his clientele. So the undertaker became an industrialist. As a matter of fact, the machine was rapidly gaining ground everywhere. In many countries, man was putting his cap firmly in the flying position for adventuring into the air, for exploring the possibilities of even newer means of communication. In 1909, Blériot flew across the Channel for the first time. The Dutchman Anthony Fokker was known already throughout Europe, and people in those days became familiar with technical development and progress. The electric tram had become the most ordinary thing in the world. The period of the electromagnetic switch had arrived. And yet in Amsterdam, the councillor in charge of public works declared,
Prohibitions upon a person desiring to use the telephone. Manipulations have been avoided up till now, and which cause annoyance and loss of time.
in spite of this, the new system was introduced. In 1911, the first exchange with two motion selectors was installed in Amsterdam by Siemens and Halske, although for the time being it was only semi-automatic. The selectors with their relays, the electromagnetic switches, were manipulated only by the operators. The improvement was an internal one, invisible to the subscriber. All he had to do was to lift the receiver, and automatically a free line was selected to the operator at his exchange.
Centrale, wat nummer wenst u?
Mag ik 368?
So the operator at her switchboard establishes the connection by setting the automatic equipment in motion, the group selectors. Then she gets off the line.
Yes, Aunt. This is Henry. What, did your canary die? Oh, dear, I didn't even know he'd been sick. Well, I'll come and see you soon.
In 1911, a subscriber in Amsterdam could hold an unlimited number of such conversations for the sum of roughly £9 a year, to be remitted to these ladies and gentlemen of the telephone accounts department. So manual operation is still necessary. Of course, anyone who found this too complicated for his external communications could always rely on the railway, such as this slow train to Haarlem.
Change at Haarlem for The Hague.
In The Hague, we find the Palace of Peace, the meeting place for international consultation and understanding. And then the palace only just having been inaugurated in the presence of many distinguished personalities, the war, which was to last till 1918. And the first concern of those who survived is the quick step, a new dance, and consequently a new fashion. And many subscribers at the time must have felt sorry for the complete disappearance of manual operation. Automatic telephone communication became reality. Amsterdam was the first city to benefit. In the three biggest cities, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, The Hague, it was possible to make automatic calls locally. But each of these self-governing cities had its own system. Siemens and Halske, Ericsson, Standard Bell. In the direct system, the selectors are set directly by the dial, as is done here in Amsterdam with the system of Siemens and Halske. In Rotterdam, the Ericsson system was introduced. Here, the dial doesn't operate the selectors directly, but instead leaves this to a register. The information of the dial is temporarily stored by the register and only passed on at a suitable moment. As soon as the connection has been established, the register is switched off. The Hague telephone exchange had an indirect system developed by Standard Bell. In the presence of many distinguished personalities, on February the 7th, 1923, a suburban tram line in The Hague is inaugurated. Ships are being built for customers all over the world. In the Netherlands, trade and industry demand new roads for even better communication. And one of the first to use them, all the way from Hollywood, is a famous cowboy, Tom Mix, driving into Amsterdam in a cavalcade of cars. In the footsteps of Tom Mix electronics, the triode valve makes its appearance, and with it, the amplifier.
Signal amplified. Signal amplified. Signal amplified.
Up till now, the two-wire system was used in trunk telephone traffic. By the use of repeaters in the circuit, it now became possible to maintain a good quality of sound for as far as 100 miles or more. To span an even longer distance, 1,000 miles or more, the four-wire system was used. Question and answer on two separate pairs of wires. Here also, repeaters were used at suitable intervals. The invention of the four-wire system is linked with the names of the Dutch telephone engineer Van Casteren and the German Ohnesorger. This transmission technique was considerably cheaper because it used conductors of smaller gauge. Holland was directly connected with the countries surrounding it, but the need for direct lines to London became more urgent every day. For this reason, a submarine cable was laid to England. In the Netherlands, a network of cables had been developed that provided as many direct connections between all localities as were possible. It had a mesh-shaped pattern. Every town has its surrounding villages. With each of these, it was directly connected, and they in turn were connected too. One of the advantages of this mesh-shaped network was that most of the trunk calls could be made with the assistance of only two operators. But at what stage of development were the other means of communication? The road traffic continued to be motorized. The railways had increased their services and were introducing bigger, faster and more powerful engines. In 1930, Holland inaugurated the largest locks in Europe, which enabled ocean-going ships to reach the port of Amsterdam. And needless to add, in the presence of many distinguished personalities. The solemn opening was performed by Queen Wilhelmina, accompanied as usual by Princess Juliana. Aviation developed in the same way as seafaring had done before. This people that had sailed the seven seas for so many centuries, that knew the vital necessity of communication, that had founded KLM, the first commercial airline in the world, also won the first great air race from London to Australia. During the 30s, mechanization and electrification progressed with giant steps everywhere. Industries expanded with unexpected vigor. In this psychological climate, the Dutch realized that the most practical means of communication between people, the telephone, had to be modernized. At the telephone exchange of a medium-sized town, the staff of switchboard operators was so large that it became almost impossible for them to do their job properly. The Dutch telephone people showed great vision when, in 1932, they took a revolutionary decision in the development in communication. At this time, Mr. Dharma was their Director General.
I'm of the opinion that our plan to introduce automation progressively into all our national networks not only strengthens the economy of our organization, but that this plan will also contribute to a vigorous development of trade and industry and lead to the opening up of rural areas. I think that the execution of this plan will require about 15 years.
For the time being, however, the operators remained firmly in the saddle. The telephone network was mesh-shaped. When the automation plans were being carried out, economical and technical reasons necessitated changing this existing network into a system of star-shaped networks. In a star-shaped network, end exchanges are grouped around one sector exchange. and together are called a sector. Now this rearrangement called for an enormous length of cable to be laid. The country had to be divided into districts for technical reasons and for administration. Such a district had at its center the district exchange. Grouped around this exchange, the sectors connected to it. New names for new ideas. And so the entire telephone network had to be reorganized step by step. The huge number of operators had to be replaced by automatic equipment. In country areas, hundreds of unattended end exchanges were built. In the cities, the sector and district exchanges sprung up, and this whole vast network of automatic equipment operated without human intervention. It only had to be kept in working order. For this reason, technicians were now being trained. Now the conversations are established automatically, they had to be registered automatically too, for the sake of accounts. Each subscriber is given his own meter in his own exchange. So as to simplify the administration, the readings on the meters are photographed. The number of calls increases. There is also a growing need for information about the time. So the telephone people offer you a charming female voice to remind you of your next appointment. The telephone people themselves, however, have an urgent need for much greater capacity. The telephone call is based on the transmission of electrical oscillations. Now this requires a conductor, a wire, and it's known that this wire has a much bigger transmission capacity if carrier waves are added. And these now become a necessity. The carrier wave technique made its appearance. But what is a carrier wave in fact? Now this telephone wants to speak to that one. And that telephone wants to speak to this one, and so on. But all these conversations are in the same frequency band. So they can't use the same conductor unless we shift them in the frequency band of this conductor. Now this is done by adding a carrier wave to each of them. When they reach the other district exchange, they're separated by taking out the carrier waves. The highest capacity is achieved by using separate routes for speaking and answering. The automatic switching of these 4-wire routes was an invention of the Dutch telephone engineer De Vries, but only on paper, as technical achievement was not far enough advanced to put this brilliant solution into practice, when at the end of the 30s, a year in which the menace of total destruction appears over the horizon. After the surrender of the Dutch, a small group come forward who wish to help the Nazis establish the so-called New Order. They mistrust the telephone. To obstruct the work of the resistance groups, practically all telephone traffic is stopped. The development of the Dutch telephone network had been undertaken with great vigor since its start, but now all this came to a halt. The curve even showed a depression during the years of occupation. Any further extension of the automation plan was now completely impossible. The economy of the Netherlands and the Dutch people were sinking to their lowest ebb. From now on, they could only wait. Then came the long-awaited moment, the retreat of the demoralized German army. Holland was free, but in what condition? Cities partly destroyed and a complete disorganization of all means of communication. time, the telephone exchange had been completely wiped out. More than 100 exchanges all over the country were destroyed or seriously damaged. Anything that could still be used was carefully collected, because in contrast to other countries, the Netherlands had been thoroughly looted. As a result, the newly constructed exchanges had to be equipped with old materials, repaired in the telephone authority's own workshops. Old and new suppliers came to the aid of Holland in the reconstruction of its telephone network. Of course, this meant the introduction of foreign systems that were new to the Dutch, which had to be integrated into the existing systems. Telephone traffic gradually started flowing again. Raw materials began to be available. On a modest scale, cables could be produced. There was an urgent need for switching equipment in order to reorganize the automatic traffic. The Dutch telephone industry slowly resumed production. The need for switching equipment was partly satisfied by foreign factories who supplied complete end exchanges. The home industries at first only produced spare parts for the existing equipment. Then Philips Telecommunication Industries brought out a complete automatic system of their own, UR45, which also had a great future overseas. The Dutch telephone authorities used this national product increasingly, side by side with the existing systems. And now they could start work again on the automation scheme of 1932. At the same time, manual operation had to be continued on a large part of the trunk telephone traffic because the number of subscribers had greatly increased after the war, and therefore telephone traffic had become much busier. For the second time, the development was interrupted by an outside cause, a broken dike in Zealand. The 1953 disaster of the storm cost 1,835 lives. 47,000 houses were destroyed, and 3,300 telephone connections were put out of action. A part of the Netherlands was completely cut off. Cables damaged by seawater had to be renewed. Equipment and telephone buildings had to be replaced.
The weather forecast for the next 24 hours. Generally clear weather will continue.
A year later, the automatic weather forecast could be dialed anywhere in the Netherlands. A chance for the many distinguished personalities to appear in the appropriate clothes at the opening of the new highway between Amsterdam and Utrecht. These bridges and highways are not premature because there are already 320,000 cars in the Netherlands. Within 10 years, there'll be more than 1 million. And the Netherlands railways, which carry them over the border, are the first to have introduced electric and diesel-electric traction for the whole country. The era of the steam engine is over now. Luckily, you could still blow off steam if you wanted to. at least as far as musical communication is concerned. But their needs are many and varied, because the Netherlands have entered a period of economic prosperity. Themselves with the accessories of contemporary living, a white telephone seems to be the very symbol of prosperity, to judge from the number of requests for this type of set. Together with the exterior of the telephone set, the interior is modernized. The quality of the sound, which decides the audibility and recognizability of the voice, is higher in Holland than in any other country. The rapid increase of the population necessitated a partial industrialization in house building, since traditional methods couldn't cope with the demand. The telephone people joined in this industrialization. In the walls of 150,000 houses, a combined network was built in, for telephone and relay broadcasting. If the future inhabitant should want the radio or a telephone, the necessary equipment had only to be plugged in. By now, everyone has come to realize that by simply picking up the phone, he can avoid having to leave his house, having to take the tram, having to change his bus, and that in short, he can use the time that he's gained. The expansion of the towns created a demand for more telephone exchanges. Technically, very little has been changed. It's still the central battery system that's used, only in a more modern conception. Selector. Register. Relay. The young woman who in 1930 was only a young princess at the inauguration of the locks in the canal leading to Amsterdam harbour has now become Queen Juliana. In her turn, she inaugurates today the new tunnel under that same canal. The cars of the many distinguished personalities disappear underwater. Above the tunnel, big sea-going ships pass by. And however far people sail the seas, we needn't lose contact with them. At any moment, they can reach us via Scheveningen radio.
De Bruin, Breda, Oranjestaat, huisnummer niet bekend.
Ja, dat is begrepen. Ik zal het even opzoeken. Blijft u stand-by?
Looking up a subscriber's number which is not known isn't a problem at all for the telephone operator, even when the caller is thousands of miles away. But this is only possible because of the correctness of the directories.
Ryan.
How is a list of more than 1 million subscribers with all the changes inherent in such a large number kept reasonably up to date? With the list-o-matic system, in which every subscriber is registered on a punched tape, which serves as a data tape for a typewriter. The particulars of each subscriber are registered on a card, and up to the very last moment changes can be effected. Then they're photographed, and the film strips are as columns composed into pages. No faster method could be devised to keep the directory up to date. Every day, 20,000 directories can come off the press. The trunk telephone traffic doubles itself every 6 years. Consequently, it's necessary to continue enlarging the capacity of the connecting routes. We already had the carrier wave system, remember? It started with 12 calls through a pair of wires. And that number, through a series of intermediate phases, has now become 10 times as many. All over the Netherlands, there's already a vast carrier network that can now be made more profitable in this way. The carrying out of these improvements is closely connected with the appearance of the transistor, and is also very much simplified by the application of another new idea, the printed circuit. The carrier wave repeaters can now also be made much smaller. With the aid of the carrier wave technique, the sector exchanges are now not only connected with the district exchange, but also interconnected. And still there's a need for extension of the number of communication routes. A solution is found in the air. The microwave radio relay link. A radio relay link transmitter bundles the calls and relays them to a parabolic mirror at the receiving station. From there, they're sent on by cable. In future, it will be possible to transmit 3,600 calls by means of one microwave radio relay link. This too will have to become a network covering the entire country. In the meantime, space high above this land is starting to be populated by cosmonauts. First, the Soviet Union with Yuri Gagarin, followed by the United States. Their manned spaceships cover astronomical distances which baffle our imagination. Traffic closer to the Earth has to keep to means of transport on a more human scale. This is valid for the Dutch, too, who maintain their globe-circling services with jet planes. But in one respect, this nation belongs with the leading nations. In 1962, it's the second nation in the world to complete its automatic telephone network. And of course, true to tradition, the occasion is attended by many distinguished personalities, who are addressed by the present Director General, Professor Bast.
Het zal zo dadelijk worden voltooid door de indienststelling van deze centrale.
The automation of our national telephone networks will be completed in the next few moments by putting into operation this exchange here at Waffle. Then every subscriber in the Netherlands will be able to establish his own connection with any other subscriber in a fully automatic way. Vast expansions and renewals in our networks lie ahead. Automation of the trunk telephone traffic has begun with connections to Belgium and West Germany. And Luxembourg has just been added. Soon it will be possible to dial London and Paris automatically. The integration and cooperation between countries in this part of the world creates a growing need for more direct communication. As a result, the automation of the telephone network is stepped up as much as possible. For many international calls, however, the intervention of the operator is still needed because other countries are not yet sufficiently far advanced in their automation. European cooperation is also evident in the joint use several countries make of the available connections with America by submarine cables. The United States, in putting its artificial star into orbit, supplied an important contribution to these intercontinental connections, the Telstar. This type of telecommunication can establish a connection from any point on the globe to any other one. And Lyndon Johnson was one of the first to communicate with Europe by Telstar. These days, more than ever before, man seems to be part of the crowd. But it's still a crowd of individuals who each feel a need to communicate with others, with the people around them, and with those who are far away. The means of communication are of basic importance in our society. And this is a consequence of the enormous technical development which man has accomplished in the course of one generation. Today is growing up in a world of electronics. The youth of today will phone tomorrow with another type of telephone, with faster connections, with multi-tone code signaling. And all these calls will pass through electronic exchanges with ferrite matrix memories, where nothing moves and switching is soundless. No, all this is far beyond the understanding of anyone who is not a specialist in this field. Since Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, the number of subscribers in the Netherlands alone rose to 1,300,000. Yes, there can be a telephone call for you in the Netherlands.